Hi, I'm Renee Tucci, and today we're going to make a beautiful ribbon tapestry wall hanging. Now there's many different ways to make a wall hanging. I'm going to show you my way. And this design is perfect for spring as we're going to be making it, but of course you could change up the colors and the materials that we're going to be using. And it's even perfect to be transitioned for the holidays. So keep this craft idea in mind as you decorate throughout the year. All right, let's get started by creating our structure. And what I have here are actually 2 cedar shims. So that means that they're angled, as a shim is, a little fatter on one side and it gets narrow on the other. So if I have 2 and I put them in opposite directions, they become square and flush. Now, between these cedar shims, I'm going to add hooks, a hook for each side, and that's what our ribbon connection is going to be connected to. So I have pre-made here 2 hooks with a wire extension, and I'm going to go ahead and fold that bottom wire up so that I have a little bit more body for the glue to hold on to. All right, and then on just, I'm going to move that, on just one of the layers of the shim, I'm going to take my hot glue gun and add a healthy bead of glue to this wire and just set it right on the shim, about 1/3 in from the left side. Then I'm going to repeat that, and we're going to do 1/3 in on the right side. Okay. All right, so now we've got our hooks in place. Let's close this up with the second shim. So like I said, make sure that the fat side is now connected to the thin side of the other shim. And we'll take a bead of hot glue, again, run it down the shim. Make sure your glue is feeding into your gun. There we go. And simply press them together. Line them up and press them together. Push them down pretty hard. Use some force to make sure they're connecting all the way across. And so basically you have sandwiched your hooks between your 2 shims. And that's our real structure that we're going to build from. Next, I have a piece of cardboard here, and it's cut precisely to be just a little bit longer on all sides than our shims. So same procedure here. I'm just going to take a dab of glue straight down my base here, and we're going to attach that to the cardboard. And this is just going to give us a little bit of a bigger workspace to work on, while still providing that structure and hard surface to hang from underneath. And as you know, with hot glue, this is quick drying, so this doesn't take long at all. All right, and there you go. So now we have our backing that our ribbon will attach to, and our front that we're going to actually glue our materials onto. Let's go ahead and do our ribbon attachment now. I have a piece of chenille ribbon here, or chenille, I guess this is yarn, and I have pre-cut it. I sort of measured how long I want the hook to be, and then I left some length for a knot. So I'm just going to take one side and thread it through my hook and just do a square knot so that it doesn't slip, because the chenille ribbon is very slippery. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Here we go. And now you've got a beautiful, soft and fuzzy hanger. Okay, so let's start to build our base. Now, I'm going to use hot glue for all of this application, so it's a really easy adhesive to find. Most of you have it in your craft closets. I'm going to start by laying a base of moss on the cardboard, and that's just going to help cover the mechanics so that we don't actually see the cardboard as we get going, but it will still, as I said, provide that structure underneath. So this is called Spanish moss, and it's sort of a stringy, long type of moss anyway, but it's great because you can stretch it and pull it apart and get really great coverage out of it. So just do what I call dry place it and play with it on the cardboard, stretch it to the length you need it to be, and then pull the layers apart so that it's just about the width of the cardboard. It's okay if you can still see the cardboard a little bit. We're going to add a lot of layers of other materials to it, so you won't see it by the time we're done, but this just helps cover the base early on. So once you're happy with the moss, go ahead and just again add some glue. You can be liberal with the glue. Now if you happen to have a multi-setting glue gun, I have mine set at 60 watts and that's perfectly fine. You don't need it to be super hot. And then just press the moss onto the glue. It's a quick bond. And there you have it. We already have covered most of our mechanics here in our wall hanging. Now, the moss is actually a fresh material that has been dried. It is brittle, so it will make a little tiny bit of a mess, but it cleans up very quickly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and brush that out of my workspace here. Okay, so now we're gonna move on and add our ribbon. Now, I have pre-cut several different types of ribbons and yarn, and that's the beauty of this, is to have as much variety as you want and to change up that variety to coordinate with your decor. So the elements that I've chosen here today are more like vintage style, more spring and pastel and light colors, but of course you could go with bold colors as well. But I'm just putting a bead of glue on the end of some of this chenille. I have it pre-cut to different lengths so that we have some variance throughout the aesthetic of the piece. So keep that in mind as you're laying these out. Again, you could always dry place these. Pretend that you're place them and see, make sure you like the length that they're hanging at, and then commit with the glue. Okay, so that was 4 pieces of the chenille. You could, if you didn't want to glue the yarn or the ribbon, you could wrap it around and tie it on, but I feel like that really kind of takes up a lot of the yarn because you're not seeing a lot of it that's wrapped around. So just to minimize the amount that I have to use, I'm simply gluing it on. Now I've got 2 pieces of a mauve colored satin here, and I'm going to do the same thing. Little glue. Okay. Next up, I have an ivory colored lace ribbon, and this is much more narrow than the satin that I just put on. So it's really handy to get a mix of widths and lengths and detail and pattern. Really play with that. And of course, once you've finished it, you could always tack a few more in, so you don't have to fully commit while you're making it. You can finish and just tuck more in later on. All right, and just make sure you're spanning the length, not just clustering one type in one area. Now I have a similar style of lace, but this is a wider variety, and it's pink, which will go nicely with the pink satin and the florals that we're putting in. Okay. And then lastly, I have another lace variety, but this is in an aqua shade, so it's really pretty contrast to the white and ivories that we have in here already. Oops. Now, of course, when you're working with the lace ribbon, you need to be really careful because the glue will push right through that pattern and will come out the other side, and you'll end up with glue on your fingers. If it's not just out of the gun, it won't hurt at all, but you will end up with little glue globs on your fingers that you'll need to pick off. They come off very easily. Okay, so you really can't go wrong with this. Just alternate your colors across the board. And here's my last one. Okay, so that makes 14 pieces that I have across this board. Of course, you could do more, you could do less. But it has created a really beautiful ribbon tapestry here to operate as our base. And this is, of course, the back. So we're going to go ahead and add florals to the front. And let's do that now. Okay, so I'm going to start with my greenery. I just want to add a little bit of this, and everything we're working with today is a faux botanical or permanent botanical or a silk flower, whatever you call it. So I've just got some silk fern here, and using a good pair of wire cutters and some muscles, you'll just cut these individually free from the main stem. And you might even want to cut them into smaller pieces. So for example, this one stem resulted in 3 individual ferns. I think I might put one across the left, one across the right, extending just a bit beyond that cardboard so that we have a nice blend. And then this third piece, I'm actually going to cut into smaller pieces so that I can add them throughout. So we're just adding some glue to the fern. Now be careful when you're doing this over the ribbon because it could drip down and ruin the ribbon. So you want to avoid that, obviously. Okay, and then I've got these 3 sections here from my other piece. I'm going to slide these into the middle area, but the great thing about silk flowers is that they're wired. They're made on a wire base, so you can actually bend them and create some dimension and some depth. And so that's what I'm doing with these pieces. I'm laying them down and then I'm bending them upwards, gluing down the bottom part and bending up the top. Here we go. And that'll give our flowers kind of some nooks to live inside of also. Okay, so hopefully you can see that I've got some nooks forming here. I have my second fern, and I don't want to go too wild right off the bat with adding in my ferns. I can always come back in and add some more. So I'm just going to cut one more section off of my second piece and do that same technique where I'm cutting this into sections and gluing that in a folded angle. Okay, so far so good with our greenery base. You can see there we've already got a great base to work on. Now let's go ahead and add our floral base. I love to start with a piece of hydrangea because it covers so much so quickly. And it's got all these great little individual sections. So I'm going to take my wire cutters and cut them all free so they'll each go in individually. And some of the center wires are a little bit thick and you've got to use some muscle. I often will just press it into my thigh and then I'm able to get a good cut on it. Now I would actually save these leaves as well to use, and you can often just pluck them right off the stem. And we'll just set those aside. We may decide we want to use them later. We don't have to know that now, but at least we'll have them. Okay, so now I've got all these sweet little hydrangea florets. I'm going to start to lay them into the nooks that I've created with the fern. And keep in mind, if you're working on a tabletop like I am now, that this is going to be seen in an upright view, so you'll want to every now and again pick it up, check it, make sure you're covering the areas you're wanting to cover. Sometimes when you work on something that's laying down, when you pick it up, a spot you thought you covered all of a sudden is not covered. And a great example of that would be this top area here. Since it's sort of facing away from me, it could be easy to forget. So I'm going to make sure actually right now that I start to fill that in. You want to make sure you have some dimension all the way across the piece. Keep an eye on your glue and feed more sticks in as you need. Now, keep in mind that we do have a focal flower planned of this blue aqua-colored rose to coordinate with our ribbon. So I want to make sure I leave a nice spot in my real estate here to make sure that that will nestle in nicely. But I'm going to put that in a little later. But I'm thinking ahead and making sure I'm leaving a place for it. Okay. All right, let's see how we're doing so far. So far, so good. And it may want to kind of swing forward a little bit when you pick it up, but once you rest it against the wall, it will straighten out and it will be just fine because we've got that sturdy wood backing. Okay, so next up, you know what, let's go ahead and add this blue rose, or you know what, this actually might be a blue peony that we're going to add into here just to make sure we get that focal point in. So this is another thick stem. Have to use my thigh for that one. And it came with a little bud, so we'll use that as well. All right, now this is a heavy flower, so you want to make sure you get a good amount of glue on there. And also, like I said, that you've got a spot saved for it. So you might want to dry place it. Go ahead and maybe pre-bend the stem. So if you bend the stem so that there's an area that is horizontal, that's where you'll lay your glue bead. And then that can set into the moss area. And then the flower will be outright and in its showiest form. Again, make sure you've got a lot of glue on there and that you get really good contact within your base. Okay, it's in there. Nice. Okay, so my rose is a little bit off center and that is fine. In fact, it's what I wanted. So I'll balance that out with my little bud that came. So I need to cut this just a bit shorter. You don't want too much stem to work with because then it'll jut out too much. Okay, so again, I'm going to pre-bend this wire so that I have a horizontal flat surface to work into my piece here. And just do a practice placement. Yep, I'm pretty happy with that. There we go. Okay, next up we're going to add our last real flower, And that's going to be these miniature roses, and that's going to add such a beautiful garden effect to our piece here. So this will be real easy. These are nice thin stems. We'll cut this off the main stem into smaller sections. Again, any leaves that are still on the stem, we'll set those aside and decide if we want to use them later. But we've got these great little clusters now. And again, you may want to practice place each one, do that little bend motion if you want it to hang out a little bit as opposed to just being flat in there. We want it to show as much as possible. So let me see, actually, this will need to be a little shorter. And I'll start to add these in all around. And again, don't forget the top and the bottom. Now I have a second piece of rose, a second stem of a miniature rose here. We're going to add that in now. Now before I add these in, I'm actually going to pick this up and look at it as it would hang on the wall. And make sure I really know where I want to put these roses, where I need that coverage. So it looks like I could use a little cluster right here, and perhaps another one over here. And I think I have a third, so we'll do that in the center. That should balance us out. There we go. Okay, so we've got all of our main stems in. So now at this point, what we have left are all the leaves that were on the flower stems that we cut off, and I don't want to waste those. They'll add a lot of great dimension. So I'm going to go ahead and add them in between the blooms and maybe even allow them to extend out a little bit just to create more of that garden feel. And now I have just a few peony leaves left, so I'm going to go ahead and add them in just for a little bit of a different leaf shape and texture. Well, I am quite pleased with this. I really love it. I think we can say that we are finished with our ribbon wall hanging tapestry. Thanks so much for joining today. I hope you've learned a tip or technique and that you have a great day.